We are now back again for a guest who is back by popular demand, actually, and who I always, enjoy speaking with. I think is a very insightful person for us to speak about. So during this segment, we'll be talking about Christianity in Palestine. We were previously joined by Sam Munayer, a Palestinian theologian from Jerusalem who holds degrees from Durham University and the University of Exeter, and who works as an advocacy and access officer for a humanitarian organization that works across Gaza and the West Bank. He's also the co-author with his brother John of the book entitled The Cross and the Olive Tree, Cultivating Palestinian Theology Amid Gaza. We spoke about Christian Zionism on Monday, and today we want to talk about Christianity in Palestine in a little bit more depth. Thank you for joining us again, Sam. It's lovely to have you.
Good morning, and it's great to be back, and I'm excited to speak on a topic that I'm much more interested in, which is Christianity in Palestine. So it's great to be back.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, on that question of and the story of, the history of Christianity in Palestine, I mean, how does it diverge from histories of Christianity that we learn about that focus on the emergence of Christianity in Europe and the Crusades? I think to some degree it's a bit of an intuitive question. I mean, of course, Jesus, Sayyidina Isa, was born in Palestine and was from, was from there and lived there. So it almost comes across as a bit of a silly question, but I think a lot of people kind of disassociate Palestine from, the fact that that is where he was born and where he kind of operated culturally, socially, politically, religiously. So what can you tell us about that?
Let me begin with an anecdote to kind of flesh out exactly what you just pointed out. So when American and Western Christians travel around Palestine, specifically in the place where I live in Jerusalem, and sometimes they encounter Palestinian Christians, they ask us, when did we convert to Christianity? Assuming that we were in the past Muslims or a different religion, and then we converted to Christianity once the West influenced Palestine. And our answer is that we converted 2,000 years ago. And that answer shows you that Christianity was born in Palestine. Jesus is Palestinian. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew operating within the Second Temple time under the Roman occupation. And the beginning of the Christian movement and the Christian religion began in places like Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. We believe that Jesus grew up in Nazareth and was crucified in Jerusalem. But even more than just the lifetime of Jesus is that the foundations of the church fathers, of the Christian tradition, also happened in Palestine. So, for example, Gaza is one of the most important geographies, most important cities for the Christian monastic movement to emerge. And I think that is something that is overlooked by Western Christians, precisely because they have co-opted Jesus into their own liking and into their own skin and made Jesus a white person, a white Western person, rather than what Jesus was, which was a Palestinian Jew roaming around Palestine, preaching liberation in the Second Temple period in the first century.
Thank you, Sam. I mean, also, there are a lot of accounts and travel writing by, British administrators and, military figures who were in Palestine during the British Mandate as well, who were very dismissive of the fact that, Palestinian Christians existed and would say things like, what do these Palestinians know about Jesus? Which is, again, as we say, a super ironic question to be asking. And we spoke as well earlier this week with the historian Muhammad Mar'i, who gave us an overview of the Crusades and talked about how the Crusaders also had a very limited idea of who counted as Christians and what counted as Christendom. And in fact, he mentioned that the Crusaders themselves also fought against Christians, in the places that in Anatolia and now Turkey, and I would imagine probably in Palestine as well. So can you offer us just really quickly any further insight on this?
Exactly. I mean, my heritage, Abdullah, comes from the Eastern tradition of Christianity. And when the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem and invaded Palestine In fact, a big segment of the population they persecuted were the Eastern Christians. So the tension between the East and the West is something that is historical and long before kind of the colonial period that began in the 15th century. And to this day, Palestinian Christians, we do not look at the Crusader period as anything that is positive or anything that is good. We, in fact, look at the Crusader period as something that is a great tragedy. And what is interesting, Abdullah, is that now we are seeing rhetoric that is emerging in the West that is speaking in this Crusader language that was evoked in centuries before, with all that is going on in Palestine, with the genocide in Gaza, with the apartheid system that is still occurring. We are also seeing the emergence of this logic that is still persistent in the West that dates back to the Crusader period. And this is a great tragedy to the indigenous Christianity that is in Palestine, but all over the Middle East. Centuries and centuries of tradition and heritage that is continuously being erased by the same kind of logic that the West has had in a Christian form. So it brings up the questions. It begs the question, which is, are we the same faithful brothers and sisters? Do we worship the same God? And my answer is that we are not. We do not worship the same God, and we are a different type of Christians.
Thank you. And I mean, the other side of that, history and conversation as well is the fact that there is also this historic relationship between, Christians and Muslims in Palestine. That's not just that we live together. I mean, you very rightly pointed out on Monday when we spoke previously that we share a struggle against Israeli settler colonialism. We are both the victims of it. And we both, many of our figures in the struggle, it doesn't matter what religion they are. They are our leaders and our inspiration as well, whether they are Muslim or Christian. But what can you tell us more about the historical nature of the relationship between Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Christians? So, for example, if we talk about shared religious symbols or shared practices and religious commemorations and things of that nature.
I'm going to answer this question in two ways. The first is there is a shared relationship of respect and tolerance that dates back to the different conquerors of Jerusalem and of Bethlehem, where they, for example, Salah ad-Din and others, they erected mosques right next to churches like the Church of Resurrection, the Church of Nativity, to make sure that the Christians in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem, respectively, are still able to practice their religion without interference and not turn the church into a mosque, or not to desecrate the church itself, but even to partake in some of the rituals there. So on one hand, you have a history which is of respect and tolerance by kind of the conquerors and rulers. I'm not going to sugarcoat that there's not been any tensions or even mistakes, but that is a tradition that exists to this day. When I go to pray in the Church of Resurrection in the old city of Jerusalem, right next to me is the mosque of Umar. And the church bells ring side by side to the call to prayer. And that is something that I think is very special for my own spirituality as a Palestinian Christian in Jerusalem. The second part is, as you mentioned, is that there's shared rituals by the people. So religious practices have evolved and have been contextualized to the landscape of Palestine. And the landscape of Palestine is one that Christians and Muslims and Jews have shared for centuries. And in these practices, you see that there is a common respect and a kind of transcendental sectarian boundaries between the different religions, where there's something that connects people together within the land itself rather than our own sectarian identity. I'll give you one last example, is that the Church of St. George, or Knisat al-Khadr in Arabic, that is located in Lid, where my ancestors come from, we frequently see Muslims and Christians praying side by side, because for the Christians, this is the Church of St. George. This is a place where the tomb of St. George is located. But for Palestinian Muslims, this is what is referred to as a maqam, where if they pray there, they will receive a certain blessing, a barakah in Arabic. And I think that is what is special about Palestine, and exactly what is being erased by ideologies like Christian Zionism or Western Christianity in general.
Thank you so much, Sam. There are so many more things I would have loved to discuss with you, which seems to be sort of a running topic today, actually, with all of the guests that we've had, including, of course, your book, The Cross and the Olive Tree, Cultivating Palestinian Theology Amid Gaza, which we had the privilege of hosting the very first launch for here in Johannesburg at a venue called The Forge in Braamfontein. And I would hope, that moving forwards, you join us regularly on Salam Media, where hopefully we can get into the book. But for now, I do very much recommend to our listeners that they do read it and engage with it in a very serious way, because it really counters a lot of the very pernicious and dangerous narratives that we often get told about, this kind of like religious war, or this idea that Palestinian Christians are not part of our struggle, which they absolutely 100% undoubtedly are. And in fact, they also, given the kind of narratives that emerge about Christianity in the West, and this kind of crusader rhetoric that you're talking about, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of the US, was saying that it was a mistake for the West to stop expanding, and of course the West, according to him and the likes of him, is based on this sort of really bizarre notion of Judeo-Christian values that are something we probably should have spoken about at some stage. And so I strongly recommend Sam and John Munayer's book to all of our listeners. But with all of that being said, unfortunately, Sam, I have to say goodbye to you today, wishing you a good weekend, a blessed Friday, a blessed Saturday, a blessed Sunday, and hopefully the conversation will continue.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, and blessed Ramadan once again to all the listeners. And I will just end by saying that John and I are proud that the first book launch and the first event for The Cross and the Olive Tree was in South Africa. That's how it should be. So thank you very much, and have a blessed weekend.
Thank you, and a blessed Lent to you as well, and to John. All right. We will now go to a quick break, after which we will be joined by Professor Aaron McCandless of the University of Johannesburg to discuss the Trump Board of Peace and whatever future prospects that offers in terms of, the very limited possibility of it bringing some sort of peace and justice in this world, or the very much more substantial possibility of it ending the world. And so we'll see you in a few minutes.